Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to Gaia Sanctorum. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to take the time to share a little of who I am and why I'm here. I learned to make medicine before I learned to read, not because my family were herbalists or healers, but because in my household, which I came from a family of Mediterranean immigrants, food was medicine. There was no separation. My Gaia didn't say, let me give you an herbal remedy. She said, come, eat, and handed you soup that would cure whatever was actually wrong with you. I spent 25 years walking away from that wisdom and another 30 years finding my way back. And this is that story. So I was born in 1970 to parents who carried entire worlds in their suitcases. My father was Greek and Italian. He was born and raised in Ethiopia and arrived here in America with recipes that blended Greek food and olive groves with Ethiopian spice markets. My mom came from France, and the techniques that her grandmother taught her were methods that went back for generations. And here's the gift that I didn't really recognize as a child. Both sets of my grandparents lived within a mile of us. And if you understand what that meant, I didn't just visit my grandparents on the holidays. I lived in their kitchens and absorbed their rhythms and their rituals and their medicine disguised as food. While my American friends were eating TV dinners, I was watching my yaya crush oregano between her palms. And she'd actually make me smell her hands afterwards. This, she'd say, this is protection. This is medicine. We were Greek Orthodox and devoutly Catholic. Yes, both. Don't ask me to explain the family dynamics, but woven through all of that formal religion was something much older. Greek superstition, folk magic, the prayers that grandmothers whisper over food that aren't quite prayers. The evil eye that was so real in my house, hung over all the doorways, along with protective herbs. So was the understanding that some knowledge doesn't come from the priest, it comes from grandmothers. Now, food wasn't just sustenance in my family, food was how you loved on people, how you healed them, how you protected them. If you had a cold, my yaya would appear with chicken soup that had been simmering since dawn with garlic and lemon. It's an egg lemon sauce we call algo limono. But she didn't say, this will heal your cold. She said, eat kuklamo, eat my child, and handed you a bowl of something that somehow made everything better. If you had a stomach ache, my grandmother on my mom's side would make a tisane, which is an herb tea from things that grew in her garden, chamomile for upset stomach, mint for digestion, thyme for everything, because French grandmothers believe that thyme cures everything. She didn't call it herbalism. She called it common sense. If you were anxious or stressed or worried, both grandmothers appeared with food. But it was never just food. It was bread baked with intention, or honey drizzled with prayers, olive oil that had been blessed. They were feeding all five bodies before I really had the language for what that meant. And every other summer, I went back to Europe to visit extended family, to Greece, to France, to the villages where this wisdom wasn't just normal, it was how people lived. I'd watch my relatives slaughter a lamb for Easter and use every single part and waste nothing. Honor the animal, cook it with herbs from the mountainside, oregano, thyme, rosemary growing in wild. I'd help my French cousins shell beans for hours while the women talked and laughed and passed down wisdom that I was too young to recognize as education. In the markets, my great grandmother knew exactly which vendors to trust, which olive oil was pressed when the figs were at peak sweetness, what greens had been foraged that morning. This wasn't shopping. This was an actual relationship with food, with the land, with the seasons. And then when I'd come back to America to processed food and fast food and this bizarre idea that cooking was a chore instead of an act of love, to a culture where medicine came from pharmacies, not from kitchens, where nobody's grandmother whispered protective prayers over soup. And to be honest, the contrast was jarring, even as a child. But I had this foundation, this understanding that there was another way, an older way, a way where your health and your soul and your food and your family were all one thing and not separate categories. I didn't realize that I was being educated. I thought I was just eating a spanakopita or my grandmother's cassoulet or my grandfather's roasted vegetables, which were always swimming in olive oil. But every meal was a transmission. Every kitchen moment was a form of apprenticeship. Every herb crushed, every prayer whispered, every eat this, it's good for you, was planting seeds that I would not recognize as medicine for another 20 or 30 years. That was the blessing. I was raised by people who knew, who carried ancestral wisdom in their bones, who understood that healing wasn't separate from living and that medicine grew in gardens, that food prepared with love and intention could transform bodies and souls. I didn't appreciate it then, but how could I? I was a kid in America. I wanted McDonald's like my friends. But thankfully, those seeds were planted pretty deep. And when everything fell apart years later, when I lost my way completely, those seeds were still there, percolating in the dark, waiting, ready to grow. And then came the years that I don't talk about much: adolescence and young adulthood. My bon papa, my grandfather, was my best friend. And when I was 12, he died suddenly. And it was a catalyst. I walked away from everything that I had been given. And like a lot of people, especially at that age, I was looking for something, anything, to fill a void that I couldn't name. And addiction found me, or maybe I found it, along with a lot of relationships that hurt way more than they healed. However, you really want to frame it. I lost years to substances, to chaos, to the kind of darkness that felt like it would swallow me whole. And I'm not going to detail those years because that's not what this story is about. What matters is this: my body kept the score. The choices I made in my teens and 20s started showing up in my 30s and 40s as mental illness and inflammation and autoimmunity and extreme chronic pain. My physical body was sending me invoices for decisions that I'd made decades earlier. I spent 3 years as a medical mystery, test after test, specialist after specialist. Nobody could tell me what was wrong, only that something was wrong. Western medicine's solution was to remove a perfectly healthy organ, and then I still couldn't eat. My body rejected everything, and malnutrition nearly killed me. And then again, and then again. 3 times in one summer, I hovered on that edge. And when I finally stabilized, they told me that I would spend the rest of my life bedridden on a liquid diet. I was 47 years old. I still had 2 children at home, and the medical system that had failed me was telling me that my life was basically over. And then somewhere in that darkness, something ancient woke up. Maybe it was hitting bottom. Maybe it was realizing that it was impossible to pass on wisdom that I'd spent my entire life rejecting. Maybe it was Yaya's voice in my head saying, "Come eat." But here's the thing, I couldn't just come eat. My body wouldn't let me. I was on 20 medications, 20 of them, pain meds from the surgeries, meds for the complications, meds for the side effects of other meds, the classic pharmaceutical cascade. And my gut, completely destroyed. I couldn't digest anything. The very thing that my body needed, it was rejecting. And I couldn't afford a functional medicine doctor to guide me out of it. I was barely surviving financially on disability, trying to keep it together for my kids. So I did what desperate people do. I started researching late nights on my laptop when I couldn't sleep from the pain, reading everything that I could find about herbs and gut health and how to get off medications safely. I started with the pain meds slowly, carefully. I'd started making turmeric ginger juice for the inflammation and was taking high dose THC CBD before anyone was really talking about CBD. Then one medication at a time, slowly, because I knew that going cold turkey could be an even worse situation than staying on them. Every time I eliminated a medicine, I felt my body wake up a little bit more. My gut started healing, and slowly, painfully slow, I started to be able to eat small amounts of food. And that's when my Yaya's voice came back. Come, eat. And I started cooking the way that I had been taught. Not complicated recipes at first because my stomach couldn't handle it. Simple bone broths, rice cooked in that broth, slowly adding herbs, real herbs, medicinal herbs, not just culinary. Slippery elm to coat my destroyed gut lining, marshmallow root, gentle healing, ancestral knowledge meeting the herbalism that I was teaching myself. This wasn't cooking for nostalgia. This was cooking for survival. Every single meal was medicine, and every bite was helping me reclaim my life from a medical system that had given up on me. And that's when something shifted, because by then my grandparents were gone. I couldn't call my yaya and ask her what to do. But their voices, those were still there. The knowledge that they had planted in me all those years, it all started coming back online. I'd be reading about demulcent herbs for gut healing, and suddenly remember my grandmother's barley soup, and it would have this slippery texture to it. I'd study anti-inflammatory compounds, and I could smell roasting vegetables swimming in olive oil. The ancestral knowledge and the clinical research started to weave together. What I'd absorbed as a child, what I was frantically teaching myself as a woman desperate to survive, they were the same medicine. They were just different languages. By 2019, I was alive, actually alive, not just surviving. I could eat. I had gotten off all 20 medications, and my body finally felt like it was mine again. And I kept thinking about all the other people out there trapped in the same pharmaceutical cascade, told there's no hope, given up on by the system, people who couldn't afford functional medicine practitioners, people whose bodies were screaming for help, but nobody was listening. So I started Gaia Sanctorum. It was just a blog at first, writing about animism and herbal medicine and homesteading and sharing what was working for me. And I had a tiny little Etsy store with a few apothecary items that I had created for myself. Some pain salve, my green goddess salve, which is for like cuts and bites and stings, some calming glycerite for kids, some cold and flu remedies. It was small, it was humble, but it was real medicine. And it was born from not only my own desperation to heal, but the healing that I found. And it grew slowly. People found me, they'd try something and it would work, and they'd tell somebody else. And the blog became a resource, and the Etsy store expanded. But it wasn't really a practice yet, not in the way that I knew it could be. And then in 2023, I had moved to Washington, had a fresh start, new landscape, mountains and pine trees and rivers instead of the desert. I started doing farmers markets, setting up my little booth with my salves and my tinctures all over and teas, and talking to people about the things that they were struggling with. And that's really when Gaia started. People would come back week after week telling me like what had changed, what had shifted, asking for help with deeper issues. And I started offering actual consultations and meal prep to help people, personalized protocols. This wasn't just selling products anymore, it was more clinical work. And the whole time, there was this other layer for me running in the background of my mind. So I had been studying astrology for years, mostly just like my personal chart and pop astrology type information. And I happened upon Culpeper, his traditional correspondences and planetary rulers and their plants. And that was when the light bulb went off. That's was the missing piece to my understanding of plant medicine. But I hadn't fully integrated it into my practice yet because it kind of felt like too esoteric or woo woo to lead with. But I couldn't stop seeing the patterns, like the way certain transits corresponded with certain symptoms, and the way someone's chart would show exactly why their body was breaking down in that specific way, the timing, why healing happened when it did, why people came to me when they did, the plants, the planets, the timing. It was all connected. I just wasn't saying it out loud yet. And so that's what I feel makes my approach different, because there are a lot of herbalists out there. A lot of people are teaching food as medicine. So why does my work matter? What makes it different? First, in my opinion, I'm not teaching from theory. I'm teaching from the inside of my own crisis. Most practitioners will learn herbalism and then help clients. I destroyed my body, was given up on by Western medicine, and clawed my way back to life using plants and food. Every protocol that I hand someone, I've lived it first in my own completely broken body. And there is a difference between knowing something intellectually and knowing it because it saved your life. And I'm not just pulling from books, though, trust me, I have read an incredible amount of books. I love to read. But I'm pulling from direct ancestral transmission. My grandparents didn't learn herbalism from courses. They learned it from their grandparents, who learned it from theirs. And there's this unbroken lineage, Greek and Italian and French and Ethiopian wisdom all woven together. Mediterranean food as medicine that goes back for millennia. I spent summers in those villages. I watched how people actually live this. It's not romanticized, it's practical and daily and integrated into every meal and every season. And then there's the medical astrology piece. And I understand that this is where some people check out. But hear me. I use Culpeper's framework. Nicholas Culpeper was a 17th century physician and herbalist who treated the poor of London using these planetary correspondences and herbs. This is not New Age. This is traditional Western medicine before we forgot that astrology matters, that the planets have an effect on us. I see patterns that most practitioners miss. Why somebody's gut issues flare during a Mercury retrograde, why their autoimmune condition activated during their Saturn return, why healing happens when Jupiter transits their sixth house. The timing isn't coincidence. It's like a cosmic curriculum. And I've woven all of this into the five bodies framework: physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual. Because you cannot heal one body without addressing all five. I learned this the hard way. I fixed my gut, but I still felt empty. I processed trauma, but my body still hurt. And it wasn't until I aligned all five that true healing actually happened. I have not found anyone else that is combining Western herbalism with Mediterranean ancestral wisdom, with medical astrology, with a five bodies approach. That integration, that's what I've spent 30 years in the wilderness trying to find. And here's maybe the most important difference. I am committed to making this accessible, not exclusive. I am not interested in gatekeeping. I am not interested in making healing so expensive, so esoteric that only the privileged can access it. I've worked retail while building this practice because I remember what it's like to be desperate and broke and unable to afford the help that you need. I teach people to use food from the grocery store as medicine, to work with common herbs, not just the exotic, expensive ones, to understand their own charts, their own bodies, and their own healing. I am so not interested in guru culture. This isn't pay thousands for my secrets. This is here's the wisdom, here's how to use it, here's how it works, why it works. Take it and heal yourself. Because that's what my grandparents did. They didn't charge the neighbors for soup when someone was sick. They just made soup. The medicine was in the sharing, because that's what you do with community. And I'm doing the same thing, just on a bigger scale, with some clinical knowledge backing that ancestral wisdom, with planetary timing guiding the work, and with a framework that will address all 5 dimensions of healing. That's what makes me different, is that I've lived it. I inherited it. I've studied it obsessively, integrated it completely. And now I'm giving it away, because this medicine isn't mine to hoard. It belongs to anyone who needs it. So the Washington practice was growing, farmers markets every weekend, clients coming back, word spreading. I was building something real. And then my son got injured badly enough that he needed help at home. The kind of help that meant I needed to be there consistently and not building a practice 3 states away. So I moved back to Arizona to show up. And here's the thing about my life. This was the 3rd time I'd relocated my business. Washington wasn't the first time that I had built something that I've started over and over and over. Each time thinking, okay, this is where I'm going to plant my roots. Each time having to rebuild from scratch, different states, different markets, different communities, learning local herbs, finding new farmers markets, rebuilding client bases, reestablishing myself. Exhausting does not begin to cover it. So after this move, after watching everything that I'd built in Washington have to be put on pause, I decided to make a different choice. I decided I was putting my business online. Not just have a website online, but fully digital, comprehensive. If I was going to keep starting over geographically, I needed to build something that could travel with me, something that was not dependent on me being in one physical location. And honestly, I realized that I was limiting my impact, because at farmers markets, I could help maybe 20 or 30 people a week in consultations, maybe a handful more. But how many people out there are exactly where I was? Desperate, broke, failed by Western medicine, and unable to find a practitioner who understands the integration of body and soul. Thousands, probably hundreds of thousands. Going online meant that I could reach the woman in rural Montana who has no access to herbalists, the person working 3 jobs who can't afford $300 consultations. So, yes, I work retail while I'm building this. And some people might see that as a failure. A successful healer should be full time, right? I see it differently. I feel like it keeps me grounded. It keeps me connected to real people, buying real groceries, trying to feed their families, struggling with the same things that my clients struggle with. And it gives me the financial stability to build something sustainable online without compromising my integrity or overcharging desperate people. I'm creating the 5 Bodies Assessment, which is a comprehensive, personalized, accessible framework. I'm building this YouTube channel to teach this framework to anyone who needs it. I'm developing my vision for a retreat center in Greece where people can come and experience this medicine in the land where it originated. I'm not starting over again. I'm building something that can't be disrupted by the next crisis, the next relocation, the next time my life demands that I show up differently. This is the long game, and I have the patience for it. So, what am I actually building here? What is Gaia Sanctorum? So Gaia is the name of the primordial earth, the mother of all life. Sanctorum is Latin for sacred space or sanctuary. Gaia Sanctorum is the sacred space where body and earth and soul remember that they're the same thing. It isn't just a business name, it's a statement of my purpose. I'm building a comprehensive healing system that addresses all 5 dimensions of human health: physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual. The 5 bodies framework is my life's work distilled. Almost 30 years of living it, studying it, practicing it, refining it. Most wellness approaches focus on 1, maybe 2 bodies. Eat clean for the physical, therapy for mental, energy work for the energetic body. But they're all connected. And you can't heal one without addressing the others. I learned that the hard way. And now I'm trying to teach that clearly. And I'm doing this online because the wisdom needs to reach beyond my local farmer's market. The person working night shifts who can't make daytime appointments. The skeptic who would never walk into a crystal shop, but will watch a YouTube video about why they feel empty despite doing everything right. This YouTube channel, this is me teaching the framework openly, not hiding behind expensive courses or exclusive programs. Here's the knowledge. Here's how to use it. Here's why it works. Take it and transform your life. Now, the 5 bodies assessment is for people who want more personalized guidance, your specific chart, your unique imbalances, protocols tailored to your body and soul. It's 50 plus pages of comprehensive analysis combining herbalism and medical astrology and the complete 5 bodies approach. It's completely accessible because healing should not be reserved just for the wealthy. Health should not be gatekept. And I'm bringing in the pieces that most practitioners leave out: the dark feminine spirituality, working with Hecate and Kali and the goddesses of transformation and thresholds, not because it's trendy, but because real healing requires descending into the underworld sometimes. It requires facing your shadow. It requires the wisdom that sometimes can only come through darkness. And the medical astrology, not just sun sign horoscopes, but Culpepper's clinical framework, planetary correspondences that show when to work with a certain herb, why your body breaks down in specific ways, what your soul came here to learn. The cosmos is the context, and your chart is the map. The Mediterranean ancestral wisdom, food is medicine, is not diet culture. Olive oil is sacred, not trendy. Herbs used the way that my grandparents used them, integrated into daily life, not separated into supplements. This is 3,000 years of practical wisdom. It's not new age invention. And I'm integrating all of it. Western herbalism meets ancestral Mediterranean traditions, meets medical astrology, meets dark feminine spirituality, meets food as medicine, meets the 5 bodies framework. As far as I know, nobody else is doing this exact combination. And this is the medicine that I had to create to heal myself. And it works. I've seen it work in my body, in my clients' bodies over the years. But here's the crucial piece: I'm making this accessible, not exclusive. I am not interested in wellness gatekeeping. I am not interested in charging $10,000 for secrets that should belong to everyone. I am not building guru culture where people worship me instead of learning how to heal themselves. My grandparents did not monetize their wisdom. They shared soup. They handed you herbs from the garden. They taught you to cook, to pray, to recognize when something needs healing attention. And I'm doing the same thing, just on a digital scale with clinical backing. Here's the framework. Here's how your bodies work together. Here's which plants help. Here's when to use them based on planetary timing. Here's how to cook healing food from regular grocery stores. Here's how to understand your chart. Here's how to work with your shadow. Take it, use it, heal yourself, and then teach somebody else. That's the mission. And the Greece vision, that's kind of the long game. A retreat center in Zagori in the mountains where my ancestors are from, a place where people can come and experience this medicine in the land where it originated, where the olive trees are thousands of years old, where herbs grow wild on the hillsides, where the cooking is sacred, where the rhythms are seasonal and the wisdom is still alive in the stones. The plan is hopefully summer of 2026, not to retire, but to expand, to teach this medicine in the place where it was born. But until then, I'm going to be right here on this channel, in your inbox if you're on my list, and in the 5 bodies assessment if you need personalized guidance. And talking to customers about why they can't sleep and why their gut hurts or why they feel empty despite checking all the boxes. This is my mission, to make ancestral healing wisdom accessible, to integrate all 5 bodies, to use the plants and the planets and the sacred foods that we are given to work with both the darkness and the light, to build community, not a cult following, and to share freely and not hoard greedily. I'm telling you this story because I need you to understand that when I hand you a protocol, I'm not handing you something that I read in a book. I'm handing you something that was whispered to me by my yaya while she stirred soup, something that I forgot and had to really claw my way back to, something that I have tested in my own broken body and watched heal in clients' bodies over the last 10 years. This isn't theory, this is lived medicine. And here's the other thing. If you're watching this and you're feeling lost, feeling like you've made mistakes you can't undo, that you're feeling like your body is paying for choices from years ago, I see you and I've been you. Path does exist. The wisdom is still there, waiting. Your body still wants to heal. And the plants? The plants are endlessly patient. They'll wait for you to remember. Sanctorum is where we remember. Your body is holy. Your healing is possible. And the wisdom is still here. You just forgot for a while. This channel is me bringing together everything that I've learned in the kitchens with my grandparents, in the wilderness of my own healing, in the stars and the planets that guide us all. If this resonates, if you felt that recognition, I invite you to subscribe, because this is just the beginning. And if you want to work with me directly, the 5 bodies assessment is where we start, and it's in the description below. Let's remember together. I'm Danielle, and I'll see you in the next one.